Sounds good.
All right, we're gonna get started.
All
So
right.
welcome, really excited to have everybody here joining us for our, what month is it? February Inclusive Meetings webinar with She Geeks Out, or SGO. So thank you all for joining us. We may have some stragglers coming in, so I'm going to be keeping an eye on the webinar, so you may see me looking over there from time to time, but we're going to get started in the interest of time. So Fatima, would you mind kicking us off with some introductions?
Yes, I'm excited to do so. So welcome again. As Felicia said, my name is Fatima Denke. I'm currently the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Facilitator here at She Geeks Out. And if you are joining us for the first time and you haven't really heard much about what She Geeks Out is or what we do, we are a B Corp. We're based in Boston, and we do a lot of fun, empowering events for women and their allies and people who identify within the non-binary as it relates to tech or other fields. And so our goal is to create spaces through community and also through training. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you for that lovely introduction.
Yeah.
I'm Felicia, I'm the co-founder and co-CEO at SGO, and I've been in this work and in this space for a long time. I started off my career in tech many years ago, and have been really thinking about and working around topics that relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion from both sides of the spectrum. So I have a lot of experience personally walking into rooms and feeling like one of the only and one of the others. And also a lot of experience professionally. And so that's really what drives me and brings me to the work. And we're going to be talking today about a topic that I'm sure is near and dear to pretty much everybody's heart, which is meetings. It's something that we probably cannot get away from if you are a working professional, or even if you're not a working professional. Meetings are really a part of life. And so we're going to talk about meetings, how to think about it from a more inclusive lens, and how we can be thinking about running more inclusive meetings. Just a really quick housekeeping note, I already mentioned that I will be keeping an eye on the webinar behind the scenes, so to speak. So again, if you're just joining and you notice me looking to my left, I am not looking on emails or Slack or anything. I am just keeping an eye on the chat and on the attendees and making sure you're all taken care of. If you have any questions, concerns, issues while we're going through this session, just send me a chat message either to the group or to me privately, and I'll be able to respond to that and do my best to help you out. We do have everyone on mute for right now, but we will put everyone off of unmute later on, so we'll have a chance towards the end to have some time for some Q&A. And Fatima and I are going to run this as more of a collaborative discussion and a little bit more casual conversation style. So we're excited to chat with you today. So Fatima, you want to get us kicked off?
Yeah, so before we have a discussion about this, I'm interested to see or hear about what our viewers think about inclusive meetings. So what we're going to do, I know some of you might be viewing us and can see us, and some of you might be calling in through audio. So we'll try to keep everyone in the loop. What we're going to do is throw out some polls on the screen, because we want to know what your idea is as it relates to meetings, but more specifically, what has been your experience. So Felicia's going to throw out our first poll on the screen. And for those of you who have access, feel free to vote in. And I'll go ahead and read the statement so that those of you who are joining us through audio can know what we're talking about. So the statement is, and I'm looking to my left, not because I'm ignoring you, but because I'm looking at the screen. And the statement is, generally speaking, meetings in the workplace have been beneficial to me. So we have a range of answers from strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. So we'll give you all a few seconds to vote.
And there's actually a second question too.
Yes, that's happening at the same time. Thank you. And so the second statement, if you've already done the first statement, is, I usually feel included during workplace meetings. And so once again, same strongly disagree to strongly agree. Let us know.
Yeah, we'll take about a minute just to give you all a chance. And if you are dialing in via phone and you're not able to vote, no problem. Just maybe think to yourself, how would you respond? Meetings have been beneficial, maybe not, or how have you felt included or not included during meetings? So we're seeing some results coming in, and what we'll do is after another maybe 20 seconds or so, we'll stop the poll and then we'll share the results.
Sounds good. We got some mixed answers here.
People are just chiming in with their thoughts. And for anyone who's just joining us, we're just running a really quick poll on how you feel about meetings, whether they're beneficial, do you feel included? And I think we can probably close it out pretty soon.
Yeah,
Close it out?
sure.
All right, let's do this. So we're gonna end the poll and I'm gonna share the results here. So if you're dialing in with your computer, you should be able to see the results right now. So do you want to walk us through what we found?
Yes. All right. So for our first statement where we said, generally speaking, meetings in the workplace have been beneficial to me. It seems like for the most part, it has been beneficial. For about 40% of participants say that it has been. And then we have a good chunk of people who are neutral. So maybe you've had some really good meetings and then some meetings that just haven't been beneficial for you. But we have a few folks that are like, I strongly disagree. Sorry about that. Hopefully we can give some tips either to you or people on your team that might help with that. So that is sort of the response for the first statement. Second statement, I usually feel included during workplace meetings. So we have no strongly disagrees, which that's a good thing, but we do have a good amount of disagrees, right? So there are people who are joining us today who have not felt included in meetings, and then a neutral to agree amount of people who are like, okay, for the most part, in some ways I have been included. So we'll talk more about what inclusivity actually means, because it's possible that we're all defining it differently. So thanks everyone for participating. Would you like to add anything else?
No, that's great. So I'm going to stop sharing this.
All
So
right.
we have to have this in our screen the whole time. We have a couple more polls that we'll be running, but thank you for giving us a baseline there.
Yeah.
I think, when we talk about what the purpose of meetings are, there's a lot of different reasons why we have meetings. And of course, this will depend on context. If any of you have ever chatted with me about this topic before or been in any of our trainings, you probably are familiar with the idea that context is really important and very key to any discussion that we have. And depending on whether it's your job, your workplace, whether it's maybe a volunteer organization, a parent-teacher organization, even a friend discussion, meetings have a lot of different reasons for existing. And there are a lot of different ways we can think about structuring them and why we have them, how we set them up, how we run them, how we participate in them, and how we feel about them. But I think that really overall, we have to admit that it is a universal pain point. And so we're not coming here today to give you the magic meeting key necessarily, but we're hoping to have some additional thoughts and ideas for you to try and run things a little bit more inclusively. Yeah. So what are some of the barriers to having inclusive meetings, do you think, Fatima?
That's a great question.
Just
many things, right? I can even think from just like the structure of the room, if it's a physical space, and if it's not a physical space, to what, there's a lot of meetings that are happening electronically now. And so we're
Like
even,
this one?
exactly, right? And so I think about how accessible are we being, right? And, we had a conversation earlier around knowing that some people are joining us and can visibly see us, but some people may not be able to for various reasons, which might include their dialing in audio, using audio, or just might have some visual impairments, right? And so how do we make sure we're creating space so that everyone is included? So those are the first two things I think about: space, physical space,
Okay.
and then just like how the meeting is actually run.
Yeah, and I think, those are definitely big ones for sure, especially in today's world where, I think historically we think of meetings as like the boardroom with chairs, everyone's sitting around together. But more and more today we're seeing, as you mentioned, blended meetings where it's virtual, it's in person, audio, visual, there's a lot of logistical things that go into it. But I think some of the other pain points that can come up too are symptoms or behaviors that can be tied back to how we've been socialized and also biases, which again, if you know us at all, you know that we, it's not that we love bias, but it's just so prevalent. And so it's something that we think is really important to talk about and name. And in terms of biases, it can be a really big barrier because we may not even be aware that we're practicing biased behaviors. Because if we don't take that step backwards to think about it, we may not realize how that's impacting other people who may not be having the same privileges or the same levels of access or even the same identities as we may do. So this is not going to be a session on bias specifically, and we do have other webinars and other resources out there available just for that. But I do want to get a sense in terms of a baseline as to where all of our experiences or familiarity is with unconscious bias before we get into the rest of the session. And again, one last really quick housekeeping note. If anyone has just joined us, I know there's been some people coming in. The purpose and the structure for this webinar is once we set the foundations, Fatima and I are going to have a continued chat around meetings, how to run them more inclusively, how to think about them more inclusively, and then we'll open up at the end for some Q&A. So I'm going to do another poll. So if you are able to view this on your computer, hang tight. I'd just like to see how familiar you are with the concept unconscious bias. So the question is, how familiar are you with the concept of this topic? And the answers are, I'm super familiar. I've heard of it, but I couldn't really share a definition off the top of my head. I've never heard of this concept before. And then there's an I'm not sure option too. So we'll give it another like 45 seconds or so, give you a chance to respond if you're able to via the computer. If you are on the phone and you don't have access to this poll, no worries, just I'd like you to kind of sit with it and think to yourself where you fall along that spectrum. So we're just getting some examples scrolling in here, some people sharing. Give another like 20 seconds or so. I know it can be awkward when we're waiting for people to vote. So if any of you are like me and you feel like you have to keep talking to fill the silence, don't like to just sit here silently while we're waiting. But it looks like we've got a good amount of people have voted. So I'm going to actually shut it down. So if you haven't voted already, now's your last second or so to do so. But I'm going to end this and then I'm going to share the results. All right, so here's what we have. So how familiar are you with the concept unconscious bias? And our answers are overwhelmingly, I'm super familiar with the concept. Great, we're not going to get into this that much time. Some of you have said, I've heard of it, but I couldn't really share a definition. Great, so I'm going to do a really, really quick refresher for those of you who are in that boat. And 2 of you actually said you've never heard of this concept. So what I would suggest for those of you who are like, I have no idea what you're talking about, is check out our YouTube channel. We have some great webinars actually run by Fatima on unconscious bias specifically, which can give you some additional resources on that. But for those of you who are either needing a really quick refresher or you're not entirely sure, or even for those of you who are like, yeah, I got it, I'm just gonna do a very, very, very high level, super quick, like 30-second review of bias. So bias, 30 seconds. So unconscious bias, also commonly or sometimes referred to as implicit bias, refers to the fact that much of our social behavior is driven by learned stereotypes that operate automatically and therefore unconsciously when we're engaging with and interacting with each other. And so basically anytime you're receiving any sort of information in your brain, we're processing that at all sorts of different levels. And biases can come and stem from how we've been socialized. So the messages we've received as we've been growing up, our families, our media, the world around us. And the issue or the thing to keep in mind with bias is that sometimes because it's happening so quickly, we may not be aware of when we're reacting due to our biases. And the fact that we might, if we took that step to mentally take a step back and consider what we were doing or how we were thinking, what decisions we were making, we might, if we were thinking about it consciously, choose to go in a slightly different direction. So 30 seconds, great.
That was a great little, I like that. Hopefully that makes, and just also name that we focus a lot on unconscious bias because it's a type of bias that a lot of people are not aware of, as Felicia said, but we also don't want to negate the fact that sometimes biases can also be conscious, right? And again, so we're not going to spend this whole hour talking about that, but we want to name that in this space because sometimes people ask, like, what if someone is intentionally doing something or saying something? Yes, that definitely does happen, and that requires more work. But a lot of times the unconscious part of it is people aren't aware. So it's a matter of bringing it to the forefront and naming when those issues show up.
Great, awesome.
Yeah.
So that's our brief foundation there.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do now is switch gears and talk about meetings. That's why we're here. So I'm going to do one last poll. So I would like to see just who is actually engaged in running meetings. So I'm going to talk through this in a moment. All right. So the poll is, do you currently run meetings either at work or in a professional environment? Yes, no. And then the other option is I attend meetings, but I don't run them.
like
So
that
there's a
option.
distinction there.
I
So
like that
we'll
option.
take about a minute to just go through. And again, if you're on the phone and you're not able to participate, just, kind of keep in mind how you show up in terms of what your experience and participation level is with meetings. All right. And actually, now that I'm looking at the answers, I feel like no and I attend meetings but don't run them are probably overlapping quite a bit.
Yes.
So I'm just going to name that because those are probably essentially the same thing. So.
Right.
We like to talk a lot about how there's no state of perfection. We're always all learning and on our own individual learning journeys.
Yeah.
So that's my moment of realizing and all right, so I'm gonna take another like 5 seconds or so. So if you haven't voted yet, now is your chance. And I'm going to close this out and share the results. All right, so results are a lot of you run meetings. So I think almost 84% of you run meetings. And then the no/I attend meetings but don't run them, 16% of you are in that vote. Great, so what we're gonna talk about today is a little bit more around the running meeting side of things, but this is applicable for anyone, no matter whether you're just sitting there or present, or if you're actively thinking about structuring meetings. So we thought that we would actually start off by sharing a little bit about how we run meetings here at SGO, because one of the things that we're really conscious of and we try to implement is the fact that we don't want to just teach and tell you how to do things, but we really try to walk the walk as well. Walk the walk, talk the talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll kick things off, and maybe
that sounds good.
I'll ask over to you to add some additional information. So, so meetings is obviously a key part of life, and one of the things that I'm really aware of is that my day tends to get eaten up with meetings, and if I allowed it to, I would be in meetings all day, every day. So just to start off from, when you're thinking about structuring your meetings with that lens of inclusivity, first of all, thinking about, who is in the meeting. Do they need to be there? Because I don't know about you, but there have been many times where I've found myself in a meeting, sat through something for an hour, and then thought that was an hour of my life that I'm never going to get back because I did not need to be there. Why? So who needs to be there? Also, are you missing anyone? Is there someone who should be there who's not there? And then for me, the biggest thing is, what's the format? Like, is it everyone in person or is it blended? Because more and more we're seeing it is a blended format. And, our team, we're primarily based in Boston, but we do have people who either are working from home because of flex work. They're not feeling super healthy, so they want to stay home. We have some people who are 100% remote. And so that's going to really be a big consideration. And so, thinking about what the technology is as well, like, are we using a video call like we're doing with our webinar right now? Is it just audio? Is there even a possibility to have that? Or is it really only can be in person? So that's going to be a really big factor too. And Fatima can probably share a little bit more. There's pain points with that. And sometimes you have to test it out in advance and it doesn't always work. So, thoughts around structure like that?
I mean, I think your point around who needs to be in the meeting is so crucial, right? Because a lot of times, not just being here at SGO, I think about overall like work experiences, and I'm sure some of our viewers can attest to this. So feel free to chat in the box as well if you have comments or questions. But a lot of times, I don't see people benefiting from meetings because they're not participating in the meeting, right? And so your first question, or I should say your third question around, are you running a meeting or not? And are you just participating? In my opinion, I think those distinctions are important because people who aren't necessarily running a meeting, even if they're part of the meeting, are not always the ones who are planning the agenda or making adjustments to the room that they're sitting in or have anything to say, right? Like, they're usually given an agenda, and maybe towards the end, people are like, oh, do you have any questions, right? And maybe they might chime in. So I really think it's helpful for us to think about that, because then for those of us who are running meetings, we can also think about the people who are in that space and how do we create that space for them to also be included in the meeting, so it's not a hierarchy when those meetings are being run.
Yeah, what we do here, there's of course a lot of different types of meetings that we're involved with, whether we're participating or we're running internally as well as externally. But I do want to talk a little bit about our team meeting structure and how we think about it. So we have a weekly team meeting that's held every week. And one of the things that we start to do to try and be more inclusive with this is, first of all, we don't have one single owner in terms of who is running the meeting. So there's 7 people on our team, and we actually rotate within each person from week to week, so that what we see is that, going back to research and bias, there's a lot of research and evidence that shows that women, people with more marginalized identities, people of color, tend to sort of get that more housework, office work label, or even actual work placed upon them, that burden. And so we're really trying to be cognizant that that can happen, but also realizing that sometimes, there are people who really like to take notes, but they shouldn't, even if they enjoy that activity, it shouldn't be the main person having to do so, because it's also a learning opportunity for other people. It's a way to, as well, bring in different voices who may not necessarily be the first to be raising their hand or talking a lot. In our team, we're pretty small. I'm a co-founder and co-CEO, and so my partner and I, if we really wanted to, we could probably dominate the conversation and just go through it. We got a lot to say, we got a lot to think about. But not every single person in our team shows up in the same way. And some people are more introverted, some people are more talkative and extroverted, and we want to have a good balance of that to make sure that there's not just one person dominating the conversation, but also that we are hearing from everyone, even if they're not super loud or super out there with what they're saying. So to start off with, what we do is we have this weekly rotation of the note taker and the person who's running the meeting. That's the same role for us. And what we do, and what we started to do actually, even in just the last couple weeks is we started to share out the agenda the day before. And one thing that I love, and I'm not sure if you love this too, but you can chime in, is I love that we start off all of our meetings with sharing a moment of gratitude. And that's kind of actually started to morph a little bit. And you sort of kicked this off. Can you talk a little bit more about this?
Right. So first of all, I was really excited to be on a team, right? That's like, oh, we are humans, so we should check in with each other first before getting into business. And obviously sometimes you have those quick urgent meetings where it's like, we really have to talk about this. But it's really important to start off, Felicia said, with some component that allows people to sort of just express how they are and how they're showing up in the space. So when I first joined SGO and we had meetings, we would do gratitude checks. And some of you might be familiar with what gratitude checks are, but if you're not, it's basically a way to share anything that you're appreciative of, right? Maybe it's a moment in your personal life. Maybe it's something that a coworker did for you. Maybe it's something that you're internally reflecting on. Whatever the case may be, but it allows us to sort of get to know you more, and there's more of that human connection because we're working together, so we want to be connected, right? And over time, I used to be an RA, so this is where it comes from, as a resident assistant, where you work on campuses and you help people in college. And so a lot of times I always had to think of questions and ways to keep people interacted, right? And so one of the first things I asked Felicia was like, oh, since we're rotating and each person can sort of just lead the meeting, how fun would it be if we had different types of questions, right? Because gratitude check is awesome, and I want to know so much more about my colleagues, right? So I think the first question we probably asked was around superhero powers. I'm pretty sure it was that.
Or maybe superhero powers, and then I think also you may have been the one who brought this up, Rose and
how can I forget about that? That's my favorite. So when we first started asking other questions, one of the questions as Felicia just said was about rose, buds, and thorns. Some of you, again, might be familiar. If you're not, a rose is basically sharing something that you appreciate, something that you love. So it's sort of like the gratitude check piece. But then it gets a little bit deeper, right? So a bud is something that you're looking forward to, something that you might appreciate, whether it's in the workplace, you're not there yet, but it's like, I want to share with my colleagues that I'm looking forward to this. And then a thorn is something that's a challenge, right? So it might be a challenge in the workplace, it might be a challenge in your personal life, but when we're allowed to share that, we sort of know where people are. So for example, if I share a thorn and say, I can't find enough articles to share in the newsletter, that's not just for me, that's for everyone else there, because that's a moment for people in my space to say, oh, I can help with that, right? Or if you're looking forward to something, maybe next week when you come in the office, someone can say, oh, I know you were looking forward to seeing your grandmother or going to this concert. How was it, right? And so we're building trust and relationship within a team that allows us to continue having inclusive meetings.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk, especially lately, around this concept of psychological safety. And everyone's like, how do I get it? Where do I buy it? Just like, where do I install it? And, you know, it's hard because it's one of those, it's a bit more what I call squishier than like something that's really concrete, like do this, this, this. And I think that the Rose by the Thorn, the gratitude check really gets at getting towards that psychological safety with the team, because you're getting to know each other on a deeper level. And the reason why we started running our meetings with this check-in when we had larger team meetings was because we attended the Massachusetts Conference for Women 2 years ago, and one of the speakers there was talking about how they had implemented this meeting structure and this check-in structure in hospitals. And so if you think about it in a hospital setting, when you have doctors and nurses and admin staff, you know, there are periods where it's like super chill, you know, meetings are fine, everything's great, but then there are moments of really high intensity where you can't take the time to figure out, you know, why, or like what the nuances of someone's words or how they might be showing up. You really need to be operating really quickly and be able to trust the team members around you. And so what they found was that through this research they did, was that by having meeting structures in the quieter periods of time, where they could start to learn each other and get to know more about them personally, as well as their work styles, and support them and be supported in return. When it came to those moments of high intensity, those teams operated at a much higher level than the teams who were just like doing it, you know, day in, day out. One person actually asked on the chat and said, you know, great, like our team's 7 people, kind of small, that works great, but your team is 25 people, and some of you may be on teams that are much larger than that too. How does that work? It would take a lot of time. Absolutely. And you know what, honestly, even with 7 people, we're starting to see that it does eat some time. Because, you know, sometimes people have a lot to share in these gratitude checks, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes we have a lot to get through, and so it's sort of a delicate balance. My suggestion would be, if you are part of a larger team, is to have that be something that you would ask people to share beforehand, and maybe have it be part of like the team minutes, and maybe don't go through it one by one when you're all in the meeting together. But that's my thought. Any thoughts from you on that?
I mean, I'm thinking about this question in terms of how we facilitate. So when we are in a room, a lot of times if it's a smaller crowd, we have more time to do intros, but if it's a larger crowd, we sometimes ask people to pair and share. So if you're a larger team, and especially if you're at different departments, it's an opportunity for people to sort of shake it up and talk to someone they usually don't talk to. And you can kick off your meetings with prompts, right? Like, what's something that's on your mind this week? Or what's something we like geeking out, we like saying now, what's something that you're having challenge with at work that you need support in, whatever the case may be. So if you do a pair and share or a trio, small groups, then you can like at least cut it to like 5 minutes, and then people can continue that conversation afterwards, but at least you've created space for them to have a similar type of space we create when it's a smaller group.
Oh, that's a great idea. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we've seen is that even with groups of like 50, 60, 100 people, you can cut down that interaction to 5 minutes tops. And what's also something to keep in mind is that if you are approaching it from that angle, don't have the same people pair and share every week. Really make sure to rotate it. Either ask people to do it on their own, or if you need to have a little bit more guidance and structure, you can do random numbers. You can just have like, you can get into spreadsheet world. So there's a lot of ways to make sure that you're mixing it up so that you just don't have the same friends or the same people talk to each other each week.
Absolutely. Someone says, yay, Res Life.
So that's how we kick off our team meetings. And so it's a nice way to just sort of check in, make sure that, you know, we have a sense of where people are at, what's going on, and we're getting to learn each other a bit more. We, I mentioned we're about, 7 people right now. We hired 3 new people at the beginning of this year. So there are 3 new people who we're still getting to know collectively. So it's a really great way to also just get to know your team members. And if you're in a high volume team where there's a lot of turnover, or you're doing collaborations, or you're new, it's a great way to sort of get into that. I also want to mention too that a lot of times we see in meetings, people don't necessarily get the same face time or the same sort of amount of interaction. It could be because you're really junior. It could be because you're new and you're not really sure, or you don't want to speak up. It could be because you need time to process and think, and so you're not really good at being on the spot. There's a lot of reasons why. And so again, having this set up beforehand, sharing that structure, sharing the expectations, gives people time to think about it. And as I mentioned, this is something we just started doing recently in terms of sharing beforehand. Before a few weeks ago, we would just do the agenda day of and say, here's what you have to, answer the prompt with. And I think that can be challenging because sometimes, even for me, I consider myself to be really extroverted. Sometimes I'm like, I have a blank mind. I don't know what to say. So I think that's really helpful in terms of giving people that space. And then actually even last week we had a team meeting, and Fatima was facilitating a workshop, and so you were not able to be there. And so we had the prompt that was shared at the day before, and so you actually went in and you wrote down your answer to the prompt.
And I felt comfortable doing that because of sort of like the bond we've created on our team, but also knowing that I know how the structure works, right? And so for me to jump in onto like our doc online and say, oh, I'm not going to be here, but I think it would be helpful for people to know what I appreciate. Would be helpful, and I think it might be helpful to even say what the question was. Can you share what?
If I remember correctly, the question was, can you share a moment where you experienced community care, whether here at SGO or in a previous work environment or in general, and just sharing that moment. And so it was actually, I was glad I had the prompt beforehand, because I was like, I don't know. I have to think about this. And if any of you are thinking to yourself right now, what's community care? Well, Fatima did a whole webinar on it recently. So again, check out our YouTube channel. You can get access to that. But it was really great because it was a bit longer than normal. It was a bit more in depth, but again, great ways to sort of not only get to know each other, but then also there's really good ideas that are shared within that kind of a conversation, where I can think to myself as a leader, as someone who's supporting and managing a team, how can I maybe take some ideas and build that into my everyday work with the team and the people, and how I can support them. So that's how we start off our meetings. And then the way that we go through the rest of the meeting is it's structured where there's different pieces. So each person speaks to a different part of the work, whether it's the team that's working on our community events, team that's working on workshops and trainings, with other things that are going on. And those are sort of set sections. And so again, we ask people to update their sections with any highlight bullet points the day before or before the meeting is run. So that way, again, if anyone's not there, we get their feedback and their updates anyway. It doesn't have to be super in-depth. Sometimes it's just like, for example, Fatima and I manage the diversity, equity, inclusion training section. And I actually just updated my part last night, and I was like, same old, just chugging away. But sometimes there's things that people need to know, or there's pain points, and so we can share that out. And then we always close out with, just sort of like a general anything else, because sometimes there's random stuff that goes into it. So for example, my business partner and I have been trying to remind people that you get volunteer time, especially that we have an election primaries coming up next week here in Massachusetts. We want to make sure people remember that they have time that is theirs to go and go vote. And so things like that. And we also then put in the schedule for who's going to be running the meeting the week after this. And so just, thinking about what works for you. What works for us is not going to necessarily work for everybody, but how can we really sort of take what the meeting structure is, especially if you're in that position where you can dictate what that looks like and how that operates, and really think about giving people time to process, whether it's because they're more introverted, or maybe even English might not be their first language. They may really benefit from having more time to look at the agenda, think about it, share out, as opposed to being put on the spot. Especially if you are asking people to come up with ideas or brainstorming. Because again, even as someone who really loves jumping in, sometimes I just don't have the ideas when I'm put on the spot. So really making that structure in place there.
And I think for larger teams, what might also be helpful is just sticking to a template, because I imagine if you have a large team in your meeting, I don't know how often you might be meeting, but you want people to look at the agenda, it's helpful to just stick to it so that people know what to expect, but making sure that the agenda works for everyone. So even if you've been using the same agenda for the past couple years, people go in and out of jobs, as you know, right? And so you might have some people who are new to your space who might not necessarily understand how the agenda works, right? And so if that's the case, give an opportunity to explain what it is. And then in terms of rotating, it's easier for us to rotate because it's 7 of us. But if you have, I think someone said 25 people, if there are different department heads, that might be an opportunity to sort of have them rotate versus having each person rotate. And then maybe within those smaller departments, people can figure out, maybe they can come together and figure out what that agenda looks like for the day or whatever their sections are. So there's ways to figure out what works for your team, as Felicia said. I think it's helpful to name that, like, we're smaller, and it might be, you have to be more strategic when you have a larger team.
Yeah, I also want to talk about, like you mentioned earlier, where people are located,
Yeah.
how they're accessing the meeting, and the technology logistics around that. Because that's another really big consideration, right? And so we run a ton of different types of meetings, and what we've started to see and what we try to implement is that if you are running blended meetings, you have to really be thinking about the structure, how people are getting in.
Yeah.
And there's different schools of thoughts on how, like, what best practices are. But I want to go through some of the options just to discuss, like, pros and cons. So if you are running a blended meeting where people are virtual as well as in person, I personally really like having video be part of that, because I think it helps get a little bit more of that face-to-face engagement. It can be really helpful. So for example, we talked about audio and visuals and different levels of access and ability, and some people might not be able to see what's on the screen. But on the flip side, sometimes audio and auditory issues can be really challenging too.
Yeah.
So I'm personally hard of hearing, and so for me, video can be really helpful, because it's not that I'm a lip reader, but having the visual facial context can help me understand the tone or catch the words that I might not be able to get if I was just dialing in over a phone or just dialing in and not seeing people. However, I do want to note, and then I'm gonna love to get your thoughts on I do want to just also mention that just because that's like my personal preference and that's how I engage and how I like to be in meetings and in these kinds of spaces, doesn't mean that that works for everybody or that it's even possible. So, in terms of having your video on, there's a lot of conversation, especially recently, that I've been seeing around sort of the face-to-face tax almost, which is that, like, if you're a woman, you sort of feel like you have to be, makeup, wearing the right clothing, ready to go in order to have that visual if you're remote or if you're dialing in, versus, men who are more just like, let's turn on the video, no problem. And also thinking about, are you working from a home office? Are you working from home because you have a sick child or you're sick? And so, what's the background look behind you? Like, is there a pile of dirty laundry? Is there, like, what happens with me sometimes when I unexpectedly work from home, is there a cat wandering through that wants to, scope out what's happening with you? And so sometimes having a video on is actually not preferred for the person who's on that other side of the screen.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And so I do want to name that as well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think everything that you said is spot on. And in terms of virtual or blended meetings, the other piece, of course, is time zones, right? So we talked a bit about, we have at least one person who's not in our time zone. Kosia, she's fine, Rachel, right? And so really thinking about how do we make sure that our time, like, we're setting meetings that work for her, right? And so if she's 3 hours ahead of us, obviously like a 9 a.m. meeting Eastern Standard Time probably wouldn't be ideal for her, unless she likes waking up and being alert at 5, 6 a.m., right? And so really thinking about that, not just with internal people, but I know some of you who might be with us probably work with people outside of the office. You might have global offices. And so really taking that into mind, if you have to have an early morning meeting, probably switching out with each other. So it's not just always that one person or the people in the other office that are always coming on early, right? And so time zones would probably be the only other thing I add to that.
Yeah, and honestly, this is, again, sometimes there are no good answers. I have some friends who work with really distributed teams, West Coast, Midwest, East Coast, India, China, Japan, and getting everybody on a call together, sometimes it's impossible unless someone is up at 3 a.m. or someone is on the call at midnight. And so sometimes there are cases where it's really unavoidable, but I think, you know, speaking to the part where it's more about, are you setting the meeting without even thinking about this? Because that still happens, absolutely. And the other thing too is that when you do have blended meetings, whether you're a video, whether you're not, whether you're, you know, really sleepy or not, we also have to be really aware that when you're in person, it can be really easy to forget that there are people on video, on the phone. And so what we do is we try to have, whether it's the chat, if we're using a tool like Zoom, or whether it's if you have a Slack team, having a dedicated channel, or having someone be able to post there, or even whatever it might be, Google Hangout, having some way where the person who is not in the room can still communicate. So I've been on both sides of this, where I've been in the room and you start chatting, you're laughing, you're joking, someone says something that's all the way at the end of the room, and then, you know, it sort of just devolves from there. And then the people who are virtual are just sort of sitting there like, okay, cool. Or they're trying to say something and it just doesn't get noticed, because even if you have someone's face up on a giant screen, it's still really easy when you're in this blended format to not be able to hear or really pick up on that. So having a way to have written communication as part of it is really important. But one step further is you have to have someone who's in the room be monitoring that. And so that can also be a job or a meeting role that you can rotate. So it could be the person who is running the meeting, it could be someone else, but having someone who's really focused on supporting the virtual people or persons and saying, hey, actually, time out, you know, so-and-so wants to chime in and answer that last question, or, oh, actually, just so you know, so-and-so had to drop off because, you know, something happened or there was some issue, so that's why they're not here anymore. They wanted me to tell you this. So having that level is really, really helpful, because that way the people who are virtual don't feel like they're just sitting there wasting time until the meeting is over.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all great points. And, you know, I'm thinking about inclusiveness and also thinking about the time. I'd be so interested for us to dig in a bit more about just identity and positionality and how that ties into inclusion, right? So you have the space, you have the structure, the time is right, the air conditioner heating temperature is good, you sent the agenda out ahead of time. Can we talk a bit more about the dynamics in the room, right? And maybe we can talk about how we do it, but also some tips for our viewers to learn more about what it means to recognize our identities and positionality and how we sort of enter and leave some of that space, whether in the meeting or after the meeting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think to start off with, just recognizing that even in a casual meeting, even in a team meeting, there are going to be dynamics of privilege and power at play. So, you know, for me, I'm really aware that when I step into a meeting or when I'm dialing into a meeting or participating, whether it's internal or external, there are different privileges that I'm bringing in, and also different areas that I may not be as privileged. So if it's internal, I'm the boss, right? So even, thank you. You know, so like the things that I say will carry a different weight than what Fatima says, or an intern or anyone else in the team, just by virtue of my role and my position here at the company. And so I just have to be really aware of that. And so sometimes there are times where I would like to share something, but I think, okay, maybe not, because it's not bad, but it will just come off in a slightly different way. I also have to remember that, because I tend to get really excited and I like to talk a lot, as you probably have already noticed. I also like to speak to fill silence, but I want to be really aware that I don't want to take away time or a voice from someone else, whether that's because they are not used to having that societal privilege, they don't have that positional privilege, or maybe it's more they're just newer and they haven't really felt like they're really part of the team yet. And so it's something that I'm constantly working on, is really trying to bring in people to the conversation where appropriate as much as I can, so I'm not 100% dominating. And, you know, I'll just name that, like, I sometimes it just sometimes sort of goes out of my head. And so it's something that I'm working on, but just having that awareness around where you're coming into these conversations from and how that shows up. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And like, because this is conversational style, I want to respond and react, because I think when I first, joined the SGO team, and like both Felicia and Rachel would be like, you can say whatever you want. Okay, they didn't say you can say whatever you want, but really create space to say, like, if you have feedback at any point, or if there's anything that you have questions around, don't hesitate to say something. And I think many of us, especially when Felicia started off this conversation, when we think about meetings and how they're run, there's this hierarchy, right? And so you don't always think that your opinions and your thoughts are valued. And you enter a space where that sort of changes. It also takes time for those of us who are not necessarily always running meetings to sort of get used to it, right? And so it's helpful for anyone, wherever you are on the spectrum of running meetings or attending meetings, to really take that into mind, because it takes trust building for someone to feel comfortable to then respond to the CEO or the boss, or someone who has other social identities where that person might be privileged in and the other person who's taking part of the meeting is not. So I wanted to react to that, because I think it is true, and I do see it, right? And now I'm way more comfortable than I was before, but it had nothing to do with the specific position that I'm in now, but more so sort of the experiences that people bring in. And it's important to keep that in mind when you just hire someone, or you have a team that's sort of new. Some people have been on the team, understanding that. I think around positionality, especially as someone who has sometimes run meetings, but also other times have just been handed an agenda, the social identity piece is so huge. And not just for me, but I also think about like the conversations I have with my colleagues or my roommates, where a lot of people who might be identified as millennials or just starting a job, right? And really trying to understand, how do I navigate how to even ask questions or give opinions when I'm currently battling what it means to be fill in the blank, what it means to be Black, what it means to be LGBTQIA, differently able or disabled, however you identify, right? And so people are coming in with all these societal identities and have experiences that haven't always been great. And so bringing that into the room has been something that I've been thinking about as we have our meetings, and appreciate that we create that space for that. But it's something to keep in mind, because if you're the person running the meeting, if you have some of those social identities that I just mentioned that might be marginalized, sometimes the people who you're reacting with might not see you as the boss or the person running the meeting, right? And so that's also an interesting dynamic, because we talk about the reverse side of the boss or the CEO being respected, but depending on some identities that you might have, you might not be respected, right? And so again, we want to have a meeting where everyone is being heard, but at the same time, people's positions are also being valued.
Right, absolutely. And I think it's also interesting, because some of you may be, either this may be you, or you may be in spaces where there is, the meeting or the meeting space is made up of people who mostly look alike or have similar identities. And maybe it's you or someone else is sort of the only fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And so then that adds it's an extra, much more complex layer to anything that you're talking about, even if you're talking about widgets, or you're talking about, units sold, or whatever it is that relates to your job. It's going to be something to keep in mind, that if you're the only Black person sitting in a room and you're sharing out, like, that's going to be part of it no matter what.
Yeah.
If you're the only differently able person, like, that's the lens I bring to the table, that I'm constantly aware of, but a lot of other people are not.
Yeah.
And so just really being aware of that. And there's a ton of great research out there too around gender dynamics, around how women tend to get talked over a lot, or how all that plays out. I'm not going to go into it right now, because I do want to carve out some time for questions. But also there's a lot of other really great research and a lot of studies out there that you can dig into further. But these types of interactions, we can't divorce our identities from the work that we're doing, from the actual skill sets and the actual jobs that we're performing, because it's all connected together, and that's what makes it complicated. It doesn't mean that we can't have inclusive meetings, but again, as I said before, there is no perfect, and so even with us, like, we're constantly readjusting, learning, and shifting. And I think what you mentioned before about the feedback piece is really key. And again, sometimes there's times where I'm like, I wouldn't have done it this way.
Yes.
It is like, that's part of the work, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be a micromanager.
Yeah.
As the team scales and grows, I have to support different voices,
Yeah.
but I can also I can do the work to be open to asking for feedback, to hearing it, and not just hearing it and saying, great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're going to keep doing it the way I want to do it.
Absolutely.
So, any other final thoughts before we switch to some Q&A?
I feel good about Q&A, and if questions are still coming in, happy to keep talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute everyone, and then what we'll do is we have about 10 minutes left. So you can either chat in and we'll respond, or if you want to be able to unmute yourself and ask a question, we'll do that as well. So give me 1 second while I deal with some of the logistical back-end stuff here, and then I already saw a question come through, so I will answer that in just a moment. This is the exciting part of running meetings in this way. All right. So what I've done is I've just allowed for you to unmute yourself if you would like to, and then I'm seeing that there was at least one question that just came through, so we'll respond to that first, and then if you would like to unmute yourself, you now have the power to do that.
Yes.
So first question from Leslie: can you talk about how to best include people who may have strong accents that can be difficult for some people to understand? How do you make both people feel included? That is a great question, Leslie. You've actually been doing a lot of work recently with people from different countries.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this has come up in your thought process.
Yeah, I have. There's this is the part where both of them there's two answers in my brain that might seem very different, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it. And the first thing is I come from a background where everyone from my family are recent immigrants, because all of us are immigrants in this country, but recent immigrants, and that means that they have accents, right, that are not necessarily Western or common in the United States of America. And so I want to bring that lens in as I answer this question. As I've been doing work with people who have recently moved to the US and have stronger accent, or different, I shouldn't say stronger, different accent, let's use that, I feel like that's a bit better, is that allowing people to get used to the accent, right? Because a lot of times what happens, or what I've seen, is people automatically jump to try to explain what someone is trying to say, and we don't give the person the opportunity who speaks a different language and has a different accent to explain what they're saying, right? And so the more we can get used to it, if we're able to through our hearing, the better we become in communicating with that person who has an accent, right? And so that's one way to help the person who's sharing feel included. Now, I've also seen a lot of people, because they're so cognizant and aware of that, they get really shy. So let's say they say something and they pronounce it differently, and someone says, can you repeat that? They might automatically shut down. That work that has to happen won't necessarily happen in that meeting. It's about building trust within the team, so that if someone genuinely does not understand, the person who has a different accent can then share or repeat what they have to say. I think on the flip side, if you're the person listening in and trying to understand what someone is saying, it's really helpful to listen to the whole statement, right? Because sometimes we all pronounce words differently. Even though I was here in the United States, English isn't only my first language, so I sometimes still pronounce things differently. But what I would notice is that when you give people an opportunity to finish their statement, context clues, right? Seriously, right?
It's true, for sure.
Yeah, it really helps us to take a step back and say, oh, I can now piece what they were saying. But if for some reason you couldn't, or you actually weren't sure, maybe saying like, oh, I understood, naming that you understood certain points, so that person doesn't feel like everything that they said was invalid or like no one comprehended. And then saying, hey, you said X, Y, and Z. Can you talk a little bit more about this point? I'm struggling to understand that, right? And really talking about you versus saying like, I don't know what you're saying, or like, you don't sound fill in the blank, because then that puts the burden on the other person. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I'll bring sort of my disability lens as well too. Like sometimes it is harder for me to understand with accents, because it doesn't sort of process right away. But what I will say in my experience is that a lot of times, even if someone has like, it's super easy for me to hear them, sometimes it still gets jumbled up in my head. And so I'll respond really quickly and say, sorry, what was that? And then literally almost always 5 seconds later, my brain like makes sense of what they just said. And so they're answering me and I'm like, oh no, I got it. So
Yeah.
not saying that this is the same case for any of us who are dealing with what Leslie was asking, but to give that whole statement the time to be asked or said, and then allow yourself like a beat, just a couple seconds to try and see if your brain can put it together.
Yes.
Because sometimes it will. And I will also say too is that maybe just like try and engage with this person or these people more so that you have more experience with just talking with them. So it becomes more, it's more normalized in your head. And so you're just having more experience hearing what the words sound like. And another thing too is that trying to repeat back and just confirm and say, here's what I heard, XYZ, is that right?
Yeah.
And then respond or move on just to confirm that, so you're not making any assumptions, but that you're really showing that you're listening.
Yeah.
There's another question that came in from Jen, which was, if you notice there are people who are not contributing so far in a meeting, maybe they could be shy, they're not knowledgeable, all of those are assumptions. Yes. How do you include them in the conversation without making them feel put on the spot? I can kick us off with this one.
Yes.
I think this is where having those sort of expectations and a structure can be really helpful, and asking people to contribute beforehand. Another thing you could do is, because yes, we all make assumptions. It's just very natural to how we are. We're human beings. That's part of what we do. But we don't, this is where the bias piece comes in, and you don't want to make biased assumptions that then you go forward down that pathway without checking in to see if it's correct or not correct, or if there are other context clues. And so what I would suggest is, if you notice that there's someone who's really like not participating or hanging back in a meeting or in general, it will also depend on what your role is in your relationship with them. So if you're their manager, maybe during a one-on-one meeting, you could say, hey, I've noticed that you haven't really participated a ton. Just curious, why might that be? Is there a way I can support you? Try and get into that and look for the why, as opposed to making the assumption. I'm constantly reminded, there's this woman I heard speak many, many years ago. She was from China originally. And she was talking about how when she first started working in the workplace, she did not speak up a lot in meetings because it was more the cultural, geographical background that she was just, she was junior, she was new. And so she didn't, get out there and raise her hand a lot. And then ultimately what ended up happening was her manager pulled her aside one day and was like, listen, you just never come with any ideas and you're not participating. And so if it keeps going on this way, I'm going to have to let you go.
Wow.
And she was like, I have so many ideas and I have a lot to say. I just didn't realize that I was expected to contribute in this way. And so they had that conversation. And so she started shifting her behavior to match that. But it's not just about the onus being on her. It's also, she was having then that conversation with her manager to explain the why she was showing up in the way she was showing up, because he was just assuming that because she wasn't participating, it was because she didn't have any ideas and didn't realize that there were other layers to it. So sometimes it could be, hey, you just joined, I'm noticing this, and just looking, like not making those blanket assumptions, but just investigating and coming at it from a place of curiosity as opposed to a place of like shutting it down. So
that's a great example. Unfortunately, not a great example for the person who experienced that, but a great example to really, talk about what that could look like. Everything that you said, ditto. Other things that I would say, like, first reflect on how the meeting is going, right? Like, it's very easy to look at the other person as like, this person is different, but really think about, is your meeting just accessible to everyone? And do you create time for people to think about stuff before entering the meeting? So I'm mostly an extrovert, so I think out loud, I process out loud. But as I continue being in various spaces, I notice that people process differently. And so if you're giving an agenda ahead of time, and you're gonna ask questions that require opinions, thoughts, or decision-making, just don't put bullet points, but actually send those questions ahead of time so people have time to think about it, so that they can share. Because it might, again, we said we made assumptions, this person might be shy or not, we don't know. But it might just be that they process differently and need more time to give, more time to give thought to whatever you're asking. Another point is valuing people's thoughts. If you come to someone and say during the one-on-one, as Felicia said, like, I noticed you haven't been talking, another part is pulling out the fact that you want to hear from someone and that maybe they do amazing work and you value their insight. Because again, we talked about identities earlier, and some people might not think that their ideas are valued. And so if they hear that from you, that's an encouragement. And then creating a structure in your work meeting that allows different learning styles to participate, right? And so if it makes sense to have smaller groups discuss before sharing, or having people take turns reporting, or just asking the person who might be shy or isn't participating, what would it look like for you to participate in this meeting?
Great. So I'm going to name really quickly. We have 1 minute left, and so there's 2 more questions that I've seen come through. So what we'll do is we'll quickly wrap up with those last 2 questions. If you do have any other questions that we weren't able to get to, please email us. You can get us directly at facilitators. That's facilitators with an S at shegeeksout.com. And what we're going to be doing is doing more video series in upcoming weeks and months where we're answering questions. So if you have questions, we'll be answering them. So feel free to reach out to us. But the last 2 questions, really briefly, are first from Miriam. I think there's something to be said for the fact that not everyone needs to speak in every meeting, or they want to think, absorb, and follow up with additional thoughts later. Absolutely. I hear too many people speak just to hear themselves talk, yes. And it makes meetings confusing and lengthy, yes. I absolutely validate that sometimes people feel uncomfortable speaking, but I'm curious for the thoughts on that and the idea of including people's different communication styles. Yeah, I mean, I think, briefly, yes to everything you shared, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. That's important to hear from that as well. Sometimes it's not going to be the case that everyone needs to talk, and being okay with that too. You know? The team meeting that we were describing, we are asking everyone to share, but there are other meetings where it may not be necessary.
Right.
I sit in on a lot of meetings with the team where I just need to know what's happening, but I don't always need to be contributing.
Yeah.
So, I think just again, being really aware of that and remembering that, and not just bringing our own lens to the conversation. Yeah,
it's spot on. I agree. I think so.
And then last question from Angelica. How does one promote diversity and inclusion during occasions where leadership styles conflict? What are your thoughts on that?
I kind of want to know more about the question, because I think, do you want to get this off? Because I'm still processing what that question could possibly mean.
It's interesting because we have 2 different CEOs with the team, and Rachel and I have very similar styles, but we do have different styles from time to time, depending on what it is. And so I think just, again, tying it back to the organization and what are your goals and how do you support that with that diversity and inclusion lens. So for example, if we're thinking about, okay, we really want to be inclusive, then recognizing that a leadership style from one person might be different for another, and that we might be thinking about it differently. So making sure that we have that conversation. But I'm actually, I want to think about this question a little bit more, because it's a really good one, Angelica, but I want to give it the due time and respect that it probably deserves. So what I will say is we're going to talk more about that offline, and then we're going to be using Instagram actually, and I think probably Instagram as a format to answer some more of these types of questions. So what I will say is our next week Instagram video will be on this question to kick us off with. Yeah. So if you're not already following us, She Geeks Out on all the platforms, and we will be sending out this video recording to you afterwards. So keep an eye out for that if you want to go back and hear anything that we were talking about. Yeah. But we'll answer that question in more detail and more depth next week. And then we do these webinars monthly. So our next one will be coming up next month in March. And again, if there are any other follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out, facilitators@shegeeksout.com, and I'll throw that into the chat box here as well. So you have it if you are having trouble following along. I know sometimes spelling stuff out can be wonky. Yeah. And I'd be interested, Angelica, for you to be more specific around the conflict styles. So if you are open, feel free to share with us on the email that Felicia just shared, because I think that'll give you a better answer versus us just giving you a general answer. Yeah, that's not specific. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. All right, thank you so much. And also, if you have any other questions that we did not get to, just shoot them over to us. We'll be happy to answer them in greater detail at a later time. Yeah. Otherwise, thanks again, as always, for joining us, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Yes, take care. Bye.